Is that all? Is that everybody for now? Okay.
I think so.
All right. So, did you catch the whole sister wife thing that I was talking about? The sister wife stories. It's not like
Yes.
those extreme Mormons who have multiple wives. That's a whole other story. This is the three cases where the first two, Abraham passes his wife off as a sister, and then the third one where Isaac does. So that kind of got me thinking about deception and lying, because it doesn't really explicitly denounce it. And so I was looking at the other examples of it in last week's Parsha and then this week's Parsha, and there's plenty. So I kind of expanded my search a little bit to other stories in the Torah, and then looking for, just different anecdotes in the Talmud and the Mishnah, and other commentaries where there seems to be a leniency towards lying in certain situations. So can anybody think of a situation that it would be okay? Using the word lying, can be a little off-putting. That's why we have a whole bunch of other words that say lying, but they say it in a gentler way.
Fake news.
What was that?
Fake news.
Fake news, exactly.
I'm teasing.
Go ahead, Jack.
Well, I'm going to say, obviously, lying to save somebody real heartache, sometimes it's necessary at the time when you're doing it. Quickie, when my grandmother was dying, everybody was telling her that her son, who had passed away, was still alive. Would it have benefited her to die knowing that he was gone? No. She didn't have to know that information because she was gone within 2 hours. And what was the point of it? So all her children lied that he was still alive.
Exactly. Right. So that's a common one, and one that I struggle with on a regular basis in hospice, especially with people who have, some degree of dementia. So not only are they going to suffer by hearing it one time, but they forget about it. I have somebody right now who doesn't have full-on dementia, but he told me every morning he wakes up and he thinks his wife is next to him, and then he remembers and he starts grieving again. Right? And his wife died about a year ago. So if you were to completely forget and think that she was on vacation or something, and then he asks, is it the right thing to tell him the truth or not? So the commentators do seem to see examples like that with some leniency. Although, interestingly, one of the commentators that I'll bring when I finally get to set up my computer says that you shouldn't lie to children because otherwise you teach them that lying is okay. Now, okay, easy to say. I don't know if that guy was a parent or not. But how are you going to get them to eat the vegetables? How are you going to get them to sleep? The parents are constantly, to some degree or other, using some form of deception. So one of the examples that there seems to be a consensus on is for the sake of peace. So, for example, if there's a dispute, and two people are fighting, and then somebody says, well, this guy did X, Y, and Z to me, and then he asks somebody, well, did he also do this other thing? And the other person knows that, yeah, actually he did do that other terrible thing, but that it seems like you're allowed to lie to keep things from escalating and to keep the peace. I found a particularly interesting one as it relates to hosting people or being a guest. So if you're a guest in someone's home and then somebody asks you, well, how was it? How was the cholent? How was the kugel? You know, do they have fresh challahs? I don't know what block I'm on. And apparently you're supposed to say that it was awful, which kind of surprised me. Anybody want to take a shot at what the rationale here is?
I guess you don't want to give a kind of horror or something. I don't know. It's it's an old. Like you can't say a baby is beautiful, just in case.
Yeah, so it's not quite. It's that you don't want like people bombarding this person to stay by them. So in order to have this person not be bombarded with guests, I'm on 103rd Street. Okay, I got a little more to go. You say that their food is awful, and then people won't go running to stay by them. That one definitely surprised me.
I'm sorry. Are you telling the host that things weren't great?
No. So if anything, based on the sources, although I didn't see an explicit one about that, if you're gonna be untruthful with the host, it would be in the positive. So when they ask you how's the soup and you want to spit it out, you say it's delicious.
Right.
And one of the examples that is given, that at least that I saw, is somebody buys a new coat, for instance, and then they ask you, what do you think of it? You're supposed to say it's nice. Why? Because they already bought it. So of course my thinking is, well, what was the return policy back then? Because in today's day and age, there are people that, especially if it's online, they can't even try it on. The colors don't always match up, based on the picture and the reality. So does that still apply? You lie to them and they think it's really nice, and then they're walking around and then they realize, and then they're like, I can't trust you. So that was one that I thought might have to be revisited. Another one that I'm sure you all, well, I'm not sure of anything, but I'm assuming you might be familiar with, that I'm certainly familiar with, is when your spouse, especially when your wife, asks you, does she look good in something? So
I was just going to say that.
Right? So Dora and I have been having this ongoing thing. She asks me. I give her the answer she wants to hear. Then she says, you have to say that. And then I say, I can't win. And I say, if you really want to know, then tell me that. And then she thinks about it and she says, no, I want you to do exactly what you're doing. So it's this little mind game that we play. It basically at this point, regardless of what I say, unless I find some incredibly dramatic way of saying it, it's not going to be believed either way. Let me think of. I'm going to jump into this building now and set up. See if you can think of other examples of where it might be appropriate or not. Okay. I mean, one of the things that I was thinking about is like PR, or sales. We're coming into the holiday season now, and you have all these sales. And, sometimes I look at a sale, and the pink one is on sale for 50% off. And then I look at the red one, and the red one basically has that price from the beginning. And so it seems, legal or otherwise, that they jacked up the price to make it look like a sale, and then they cut it off. So that definitely seems wrong, and there's a whole section that talks about, I don't know where the elevator went. I'll try this one. That talks about, the term is Genevat Dat, but basically stealing someone's mind is the simplest way of translating it, but doesn't quite get it. I might cut out for a second. Which is, so for example, it goes as far
Yeah, we've lost the rabbi for a little bit.
All right, 1 second. Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Thank you. Where can I set up? Okay. Yeah, got a table. Did you hear the example I gave?
With the sales?
What's that?
With the sales, different color objects, one's on sale and one's not.
Right. So after that, an example that's given about where it doesn't necessarily call it lying, but it's still deception and considered wrong, is if you walk into a shop and you ask what the price is.
It's the same matching.
With absolutely zero intention of buying anything.
Fine, let's see how it goes.
And so essentially you're...
Sure.
Somebody's got some... Jack, can you mute? Got some background noise. Thank you. Right, so the idea that kind of leading somebody on, if you will. Right, I think that's also really true when it comes to dating, where people lead somebody on who, especially when one person thinks that, the other person is looking for a relationship and the other person is looking for a good time. Go ahead, Jack. You're on mute now, sorry.
It brought to mind when you mentioned dating many years ago when I was single and I was dating, a friend of mine was seeing this really attractive woman who was lovely, but I knew professionally that she was wearing false teeth. And it's funny, but it wasn't. And I mentioned to him it was a genetic problem she had, and it really bothered him a lot that he stopped seeing her. Yeah. And afterwards, he said, "Why did I tell him that?" I said, "But you asked, do I notice anything?" And I always wondered about that. Was there a correct answer? Because she was just a wonderful person that would have been wonderful for him. And yet, if I would have lied, it was like this bizarre situation. I don't know what the real answer would have been for that one.
Yeah. And I think there are situations that are not clear and that we just have to make our best guess, and we, I always encourage people to, get a reality check with your rabbi, get a reality check with, people you trust, your therapist, whoever, but some of these situations are really are really difficult, and there isn't a simple answer. Especially when it comes to mental health diagnoses. So that a person struggles with depression or anxiety or the plethora of other things that people suffer with. And then, do you tell the person? Now, that person may actually be okay with it if they find out a little bit later. Hi, cutie pie. But, hi. You want to say hi to everybody? No? Okay. I'll see you later. So that person may actually be planning to disclose it, but they want a little bit more time for the other person to get to know them enough so that they can make a more informed decision based on the whole person. And their hope is that by the time the other person sees how wonderful they are, that they'll say, you know what? Just so many people struggle with depression or anxiety but this person is such a good person that I think I can handle it. Right? So it's tricky. Hi, Rona and Bruce. We're talking about lying, deception, and if and when it's okay. At the moment, we're talking about dating.
You have no sound.
Huh. Check your volume. See if it's up. Sometimes it's on mute. Any luck? Garnished? Maybe call back in. If you don't hear me, it's not going to help. Okay. Hello? I don't know. I'm sorry. All right. Any other examples that you guys can think of? Otherwise, I'm going to log in over here and... All right. Yeah, I'm going to log in and get some quotes. Spectrum setup. 96. All right. Can you hear me now? All right. I think the answer is yes. So, just to be clear, the Torah is explicit about lying is bad. And I'll give you several quotes where it makes that abundantly clear. Okay. I'm just pulling up my quotes now. The one that I think most people are most familiar with is the quote, Midvar Sheker Tirchak, from basically distance yourself from falsehood. It's also in the Ten Commandments, where it indicates it. There's different contexts for everything. There's in the Tehillim, here we go. All right, now I have my source sheet. So in the commandments, it says in Exodus 20:13, you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, right? And stealing is not necessarily, physical taking money, but it can also be stealing somebody's hope. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Right, so that's another one where it's, another example of lying, but in that case, it's actually where it's very consequential, where you're in court and lying. In Leviticus, you shall not steal, you shall not deal deceitfully or falsely with one another. In the book of Mishlei, in the book of Proverbs, truthful speech abides forever, a lying tongue for but a moment. The seed is in the minds of those who plot evil. For those who plan good, there is joy. Right? So this one is not so much overtly saying don't lie as much as it's not going to work out for you. I'm going to show you the source sheet in a second. From the book of Jeremiah. Go ahead, Mark or Lenora. You're on mute.
Lenora.
Yes.
As you were reading that, I was thinking, and I don't want to mix too many things in, but I was situation with Chabad.
Yeah.
That they didn't pay rent and they didn't do what they were supposed to do and this and that. And in their mind, were they thinking they were doing good by their children, their students? I mean, I don't know. We can't get into their mind.
Yeah.
But that's what came to mind when you were saying that about, not being deceitful and I don't know. I just I found that interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you're right that ultimately, mind reading is futile, right? We can guess, we can speculate, but we never really know for sure what's on somebody else's mind. But it's certainly tempting, especially when it affects you, right? And having been on involved in that dispute to the degree that I was, it was hard for me to tell how much he was fooling himself, as much as he was fooling us, and that's where it gets tricky with the rationalizing, and so if you twist something like a pretzel enough, sometimes you can get it to look like truth. It's interesting. I was reading a piece by a rabbi who, in trying to justify the deception of our ancestors, in the different stories, says you shouldn't look at truth or false as things that are, just material, but you should look at them as, are they godly, and are they, trying to be done to advance our interests or somebody else's? I have a problem with that. I get what he's saying. I do think that intent and motive matters, but I think that it's, like somebody said at the beginning, once you start going down the fake news route, it's dangerous. I'm going to join from my computer. Give me a second. If you hear squeaking, it'll just be a second. All right, I'm back. But I do think that in the age of, the media, and I know we don't all share the same politics, and that's perfectly okay. But I think, even yesterday I was reading something, and the headline was so off compared to the actual story that I was absolutely convinced that the journalist had a really strong agenda. I think it was something about critical race theory or whatever. I don't remember exactly. It was something related to the Virginia
election, and it was so skewed. And I know it's dangerous getting into the politics, but I do believe, for what it's worth, that when we misrepresent our opponent's fears, concerns, and exaggerate them to the point of just assuming that they're bad and evil, then the possibility of resolving disputes or disagreements is much less likely. But you know, in the news, I think, is an example of it. You know, when your news, if I can predict what you're going to say in a given situation, you're probably not that objective. You know, if I read a Fox News piece, you know, I would bet money on the direction it's going to go. If I read an NPR piece, I would bet money on the direction it's going to go. They're both saying that they're telling the truth, that they're focusing on they're being objective, but we all know that that's, limited at best. All right, from a Mishnah in Avot, Pirkei Avot, also known as Ethics of Our Fathers, which is not what it actually literally translates to, but it's more of a descriptive term. And this Mishnah is really unlike any other in the sense that it's really prescriptive, kind of telling us how to live. So it's a collection of a bunch of quotes of different rabbis and their advice for good living. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel used to say, "On three things does the world stand: on justice, on truth, and on peace. As it is said in the book of Zechariah, execute the judgment of truth and peace in your gates." I'm going to skip these other ones. You get the idea that generally peace is the right way to go. All right, I'll just bring you one kind of a little bit obscure one. To the extent that some people believe that we need to be truthful. So this is from the Talmud of Chulin. And if you wish to say that there's an entirely different reason why one may not send a Gentile a cut-up thigh without removing the sciatic nerve. So this is a discussion that is around. It comes from the Torah reading around this time, when the angel, a little bit later on, when the angel grabs a hold of Jacob's thigh when he's wrestling with the angel, and then he gets the name Israel, and he injures him, and God says, and therefore you shouldn't eat the sciatic nerve. For some of us, we know about the sciatic nerve for other reasons, which we'd rather not know. But so it's not kosher in an animal, and that's created all kinds of challenges for butchers and for carnivores. How close can you get to that nerve? Because apparently those cuts can be quite lucrative and tasty. And so in this example, Samuel said, "It is prohibited to deceive people, and even a Gentile." And this ruling, Samuel, was not stated explicitly, rather it was stated by inference. Shmuel, Samuel, same thing, was once crossing a river in a ferry. He said, so now he's giving a different example. He said, this one I kind of see as tipping. He said to his attendant, "Compensate the ferryman." The attendant compensated him, but Shmuel was angry. What is the reason that Shmuel became angry? Abaye said, the compensation that the attendant gave the ferryman was a chicken that was a treifa. It was an unkosher chicken, and he gave it to him as though it were slaughtered as a kosher chicken. Rava said, I'm assuming that this guy isn't Jewish, because if he is, then it would be really problematic to be giving him a non-kosher chicken and not telling him, especially when it's coming from a grand rebbe. Rava said, Shmuel told him to give the ferryman wine for drinking in an antpaka, a utensil that holds a quarter lug, which is a measurement, a liquid measurement, and which was generally used for undiluted wine. But he gave him diluted wine for drinking. So he literally watered it down to make it look like there was more than there was. And I think of this in terms of tipping, which is this other weird reality that we live in, where my assumption is that this started out as sort of whether wealthy people or people who were giving above and beyond for good service. Now there are people that literally depend on tips for their livelihood. And when you don't give, either a good tip or whatever it is, it becomes a real issue. So I think based on this piece in the Talmud, the assumption is that we should, if that is the expectation, regardless of whether we call it tipping or not, if that's the norm, then we should be giving and giving generously. All right. So examples of lies from the Torah. And I'm using lies broadly. So Isaac lies to Abimelech about his wife, saying it's his sister, which I talked about earlier. Sarah denies laughing. So when Sarah is told that she's going to have a son, she laughs. The word is that mitzachek, right? And that's why Isaac's name was Yitzchak, because it comes from the word laughing. So she laughs, and then God says, "Why is Sarah laughing?" And she says, I didn't laugh. And so it seems like Sarah is lying to God. Earlier on, we have God asks Cain, "Where's your brother Abel?" Now, Cain knows exactly where Abel is because he killed him and buried him. Instead, Cain lies to God and says, "Am I my brother's keeper? How am I supposed to know?" Jacob lies to his father to get the blessings. Joseph's brothers lied to Joseph. Oh, they lied to the father, saying that Joseph was dead when he wasn't. And they had sold him into slavery. And then Joseph's... Go ahead. Is somebody going to say something?
Oh, yeah. In the beginning, didn't both Adam and Eve lie about who told who to eat the apple, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah.
They each pointed to the other.
Yeah.
Started right there.
Yeah, exactly. And this is just a sampling. There are other ones as well, right? And Joseph's brothers lie. So basically, after the father dies, the brothers say, "Hey, you know what? Dad said you should treat us nicely." They were afraid that, while the father was alive, Joseph didn't take revenge for them, selling him dumping him in a ditch and then selling him into slavery and torturing the father, and telling him that his son is dead. But they thought, once the father's dead and the father doesn't see it, Joseph might, take revenge on them. So they lied to him and said, "Dad said you should treat us nicely." Right? And the Talmud basically says that was okay because it was for the sake of peace, even if that peace is for your own survival. So I'm going to skip that section.
Cell phone for the sound.
I know, I hear you. Can you hear me? Ruth?
Oh, sorry. Yes, we're trying to get Iz to hear. Okay.
Got it. All right. So examples from the Talmud when it might be okay to lie. So this is a classic example. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, I'm assuming it's the same Shmuel we were talking about before, in only these three matters is it the practice of rabbis to deviate in their speech from the truth. That sounds so much better than lying. In regard to knowledge of a tractate, so basically humility, in regard to matters of the bed, sex, and in regard to hospitality, that's the one I was talking about before. So So now we have Rashi and Tosfot, the commentator Rashi and his grandchildren, Tosfot, and other rabbis and Tosfot as well. So number one, in regard to tractate, a rabbi for the sake of modesty is permitted to understate the true extent of his knowledge. If, however, someone is in need of instruction or tutelage, he should be forthcoming with his knowledge and not pretend ignorance. Dora says that when we went on one of our first dates and we went bowling, she asked me if I'm a good bowler. And I said, I'm okay. And then I apparently in her perception, I'm a very good bowler, which is flattering. I'm still not convinced. But when I was in yeshiva in Seattle when I was 13 and we had nothing to do with our sorry if anybody's from Seattle. So pretty much every Saturday night we went to the bowling alley. So I had a little bit of experience. So she still thinks I was dishonest, that I was being deceptive, and I didn't tell the truth when I said that, you know, I'm okay, that I was being humble, whatever, being untruthful. Should be the worst thing. All right. Next one. One who is asked whether he engaged in conjugal relations is permitted to reply untruthfully. Right? We don't really have the context of who's asking, why they're asking. I think that can make a very big difference in a situation like this, obviously. As a matter of decency, intimate matters should not be publicized. Number 3, when questioned about one's experience as a guest, it is preferable to downplay the owner's hospitality and avoid giving a favorable report. Right? You know, this one could easily go the other way too and make somebody look like a bad chef when people are like, hey, that person is all over Facebook bragging about their cooking and they're full of baloney because you're telling me that their food actually is awful. All right. This is so that a gracious host should not be deluged with undesirable guests. So maybe you should only tell people that you don't think the person wants to host, that the food is bad, who would return repeatedly and ultimately exhaust the host's resources. All right. I tried to find the more kind of obscure and interesting examples, which I thought you guys would appreciate. All right, from the Talmud in Ketubot. This is a classic debate between these two scholars who debate a lot. And it's not just the scholars. This is like Fox News and NPR. It's not just the scholars themselves, but the institution. Right, so there's a Beit Hillel, the school of Hillel, and Beit Shammai. Beit, like bayit, literally means house, but in this case, it's talking about the school. So this is one of their famous debates. One recites praise of the bride as she is, right? And when I bring things from the Talmud, I'm bringing it from an edition that adds in sort of commentary so that the words that are in bold are the actual translation. The other parts are helping us understand it. So one opinion is that you praise the bride as she is. And Beit Hillel says, one recites a fair and attractive bride, regardless of what the bride looks like or, whatever. You just across the board. Beit Shammai said to Beit Hillel, in a case where the bride was lame or blind, does one say with regard to her a fair and attractive bride? But the Torah states, keep you from a false matter. Beit Hillel responds to Beit Shammai, according to your statement, with regard to one who acquired an inferior acquisition from the market, should another praise it and enhance its value in his eyes or condemn it? and diminish the value in the eyes, right? So this is the example I was giving of somebody who bought a coat, and they ask you if it looks good. So based on my answers to his own question, you must say that he should praise it and enhance its value in his eyes and refrain from causing him anguish because he already bought it. From here, the sages said, a person's disposition should always be empathic with mankind and treat everyone courteously. In this case, too, once the groom has married his bride, one praises her as being fair and attractive. I heard a noise. Did somebody raise a hand? I don't know. Okay. Maybe somebody, I don't know. All right. So obviously you can keep going on and on with a topic like this, but hopefully this gave you some thought to think about. There's in the Times, there's this guy Andy Cohen, I think it is, who answers the moral dilemmas, and we have a lot of them, and in the hospice work we have it a lot as well, with people asking about their diagnosis. I had a case the other day where somebody told me that she felt off, and she asked me, should I call another doctor? Right? And I knew what she was asking, and I decided to be honest with her, and I said, your doctor said that there isn't a whole lot more that they can do for you other than treating your symptoms. So I don't think it's, they can't take away the problem. She immediately started writing a check to her mentally ill son that she's afraid of. Her daughter called and started screaming at her for writing the check and telling her that if she keeps writing checks that she's going to end up in the nursing home. And she said, I'm dying. I need to help him. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, maybe I shouldn't have said that. I didn't expect that response, right? But some, to me, that was another one of those areas of, how truthful should you be? Go ahead, Jack. Jack, did you intentionally put your hand up?
Oh,
You're on mute.
Sorry, this is all really complicated. I was thinking about when somebody buys something nowadays. If it's no good, they can return it and get something better. So maybe it's okay to be truthful if that coat looks like, they're wearing a dog on their shoulder. And let them get something better instead of saying it's fine. It's not so easy now from when they wrote it then.
I agree. I think that but I think that the message that I take from these things, and remember the Talmud, and this is something that people often forget, and we'll wrap up with this. The Talmud is actually not considered a book of laws. Even though it discusses laws, it's not considered a final law book. And so, you see differing opinions from the Talmud. If somebody just, grabs a quote like people do so often these days, without giving the context of it, it'll look like you're not allowed to do all kinds of things, and you are allowed to do all kinds of things that otherwise in Jewish law you're not allowed to do, because it's just a discussion. So I think the point of these different quotes is to kind of just get a feel for the attitude. And the attitude is, we don't want to hurt people unnecessarily. And at the same time, we want to be really careful when, not being truthful. Thank you for joining. I think the next class is going to be in 2 weeks. I apologize for the choppiness at the beginning. but I'm grateful to God and to the nice parents at the playground for keeping an eye on my bag that I left there, which had the computer. All right, Jack, go ahead.
Just a quickie. In 2 weeks, we're having this hearing screening from 10 to 12. So it'd be a conflict or not. Just a little point of information.
Yeah, no, I don't want to get in, because that otherwise you might not hear me if you don't get your hearing screened.
Exactly.
Yeah, so maybe we'll do in 3 weeks. I'll check the calendar.
Okay. Thank you.
You got it. Take care, guys. My pleasure. All right.
Thank you. Have a good week.
You too. Bye.
Hi.
Good morning.
Hi. I'm ready. I'll ask Siva from Kadima. I'll ask